The moment she pushed open the cafe door, snow clinging to her coat and her baby's tiny pink mittens, she felt every eye turn, then hesitate. It was that pause, that quiet, uncomfortable second that told her everything. Bringing her daughter on a first Christmas date was a risk she had argued with herself about all night, but she had done it anyway. And she had no idea that the single dad already sitting inside would change her life in ways she never saw coming. Before the story unfolds, pause for a second. If you believe in kindness and second chances and in love that shows up when it's least expected, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. She had almost turned back when the cold air hit her lungs, reminding her how fragile everything still felt. The past year had stripped her down to survival mode, teaching her how to carry exhaustion with grace and fear with a smile. Her daughter rested against her chest, warm and trusting, unaware of the weight her mother carried every single day. This wasn't just a date. It was proof that she was still allowed to want something more than endurance. She had told herself that if the man across the table couldn't understand that her child came first, then the evening would end quickly and quietly, like so many hopes before it. Inside, the cafe glowed with Christmas lights and gentle music, the windows framed by evergreen garlands dusted with artificial snow. It smelled like cinnamon and coffee, and something sweet enough to make her chest ache. Families laughed softly in corners, couples leaned toward each other, and for a moment she felt like an outsider peering into a life she wasn't sure she belonged in anymore. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her daughter on her hip, steadying herself before scanning the room. That was when she saw him. He sat at a small wooden table near the window, his posture careful, almost guarded, like someone who had learned not to take up too much space. A little boy sat beside him, swinging his legs slightly, his eyes wide with wonder as he watched the snow fall outside. The sight stopped her in her tracks. She hadn't known he was a single dad, too. Something loosened in her chest, a knot she hadn't realized was there. The man looked up, their eyes meeting across the room. In that brief moment, she braced herself for disappointment, for confusion, for that familiar flicker of judgment. She waited for his expression to change when he noticed the baby in her arms, waited for the polite mask to slip. Instead, what crossed his face was something else entirely. Recognition. Behind understanding, and something dangerously close to relief, he stood slowly, not rushing, as if aware that sudden movements might shatter the fragile courage it had taken for her to walk in. His son followed his gaze, curiosity blooming on his face as he noticed the baby. The man's attention returned to her, steady and warm, and she felt seen in a way that startled her. This wasn't the look of a man inconvenienced. It was the look of someone who knew exactly how hard this had been. As she sat down, carefully settling her daughter against her shoulder, the tension she had carried all day began to ease. The baby blinked, then relaxed, lulled by the soft hum of voices and the glow of light. Around them, the cafe seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet awareness of two people who had both been shaped by responsibility and loss. There was no awkwardness, no need to explain why a first date included diapers and lullabies. The truth was written plainly in their shared exhaustion. The hours that followed moved gently, like a snowfall that didn't demand attention, but changed everything all the same. They talked about small things at first, about favorite holiday traditions, about how Christmas felt different when you were no longer just living for yourself. She noticed the way he kept one hand near his son, a silent promise of safety, and how his eyes softened whenever the boy laughed. He noticed how she instinctively swayed when her daughter stirred, how motherhood had woven itself into every movement she made. Underneath the quiet conversation lay unspoken challenges. She carried the fear of being too much, of asking someone else to accept a life already complicated. He carried the weight of having been left once, of wondering if love was something meant for him again or just a story he told his child. Each of them had learned to expect disappointment, to lower their hopes just enough to survive. And yet, as the evening unfolded, something began to change. Not in grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but in the smallest details. In the way he didn't flinch when her daughter fussed, instead smiling with the familiarity of countless sleepless nights. In the way she listened when he spoke about his son, not with pity, but with genuine respect. The air between them warmed, filled with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, broken pieces could fit together without losing their shape. Outside, the snow thickened, coating the streets in white, transforming the ordinary into something magical. Inside, two children existed side by side, one asleep and one wide awake, unaware that their presence was rewriting a story that had begun in fear. The man watched his son lean closer to the window, then glanced at the baby in her arms, and something shifted deep within him. He realized he wasn't afraid. Not of the responsibility, not of the future. For the first time in a long while, the idea of sharing his carefully guarded world didn't feel like a threat. She felt it too, though she couldn't have named it then. It was the sense that she didn't have to apologize for her life here. That her daughter wasn't a complication, but a testament to her strength. The single dad across from her wasn't measuring what she lacked. He was recognizing what she had survived. As the cafe began to empty, the lights dimming slightly, a quiet sadness settled in, the kind that comes when you realize a moment is ending. She adjusted her coat, preparing herself for the familiar ritual of polite goodbyes and lowered expectations. She reminded herself not to imagine too much. Hope, she had learned, could be dangerous, but his reaction in those final moments shattered every assumption she had brought with her. There was no hesitation in his presence, no guarded retreat. Instead, there was a steadiness that felt like an invitation not to romance alone, but to honesty. He gathered his son, the child already sleepy, and stood beside her, the four of them momentarily aligned like a fragile, unfinished picture. Walking out into the cold together, their breaths visible in the night air, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Safe. Not because the world had suddenly become easy, but because someone else was willing to stand in it with her as it was. The snow crunched beneath their feet, and the streetlights cast a soft glow over everything, as if blessing a beginning neither of them had planned. Life did not transform overnight. There were still hard mornings and tired evenings, still doubts that crept in when the house grew quiet. But that Christmas date became a turning point, a reminder that love didn't always arrive wrapped in perfection. Sometimes it came bundled with responsibility, with children who needed you, with pasts that refused to stay buried, and sometimes that made it stronger. In the weeks that followed, they learned each other slowly. They learned how to share space without losing themselves, how to blend routines, how to be patient when fear resurfaced. The children adjusted in their own way, forming a bond that felt natural, uncomplicated by the worries of adults. Watching them together, she understood something profound. This wasn't about replacing what had been lost. It was about building something new, something honest. The single dad's reaction that night had changed everything because it had been rooted in empathy, not expectation. He hadn't seen her daughter as an obstacle. He had seen her as a promise. And in doing so, he'd allowed her to see herself not as someone asking for acceptance, but as someone worthy of it. As Christmas morning arrived, quiet and bright, she reflected on how close she had come to staying home, to letting fear make the decision for her. She watched the children play, their laughter filling the room, and felt tears prick her eyes. This was not the life she had planned. It was better in ways she was still learning to trust. If this story is touching something inside you right now, if it's reminding you of your own fears or hopes, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in love after hardship, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement tells us these stories matter. And before this story ends, we have one special request. Please comment below with a single word that describes how this story made you feel. Your words may help someone else feel less alone. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show up as you are, even when the world has taught you to hide. And sometimes the simplest reaction from the right person can change everything. Christmas did not end with wrapping paper and warm smiles for them. If anything, that night at the cafe was only the beginning of a far more difficult season, one that tested whether hope could survive reality. In the days that followed, life returned with its familiar weight. Bills waited. Sleepless nights returned. The quiet doubts crept back in when the house grew still. She wondered if that sense of safety she had felt was just a holiday illusion, something borrowed from the glow of lights and the softness of snow. They did not rush into anything. There were no dramatic promises, no sudden declarations. Instead, there were small check-ins, cautious messages, moments of shared understanding that felt almost sacred in their simplicity. He understood when she canceled plans because her daughter was sick. She understood when he grew quiet, retreating into himself after a long day of being strong for his son. They were learning how to stand beside each other without leaning too hard, without asking the other to carry what they themselves were still learning to hold. But life has a way of revealing cracks when you least expect it. One evening, weeks later, she arrived late to meet him, her face drawn with exhaustion she could no longer hide. The day had unraveled in ways she couldn't control: work pressure, childcare complications, the constant feeling of being one step behind. As she sat there, staring at her hands, she finally admitted what she had been afraid to say aloud. She was terrified of failing again. Terrified that letting someone into her daughter's life meant risking another goodbye. Terrified that love, once found, could still be lost. He listened without interrupting, his expression steady but heavy. When she finished, she expected reassurance, maybe even gentle dismissal of her fears. Instead, he shared his own. He spoke of nights spent convincing his son that his absence was not his fault, of birthdays celebrated with forced smiles, of the quiet anger he'd carried toward a world that kept asking him to be strong without offering help. His honesty did not make things lighter. It made them real. That night marked a shift, not because everything became easier, but because neither of them pretended anymore. They stopped performing resilience and allowed themselves to be human. And in that shared vulnerability, something deeper than romance began to grow: trust. The children sensed it before the adults did. Her daughter began reaching for him without hesitation, comforted by his calm presence. His son started asking questions about when they would all be together again, innocent curiosity wrapped in hope. Watching them, she felt a familiar fear rise. This mattered now. The stakes were higher, and walking away would hurt more than staying ever could. Then came the moment that nearly broke everything. An unexpected complication from her past surfaced, one that threatened stability she had worked relentlessly to build. It meant uncertainty, difficult choices, and the possibility that she might need to move away temporarily. When she told him, her voice shook, not because she expected him to fix it, but because she feared what it would cost them. Silence followed, the kind that stretches painfully long, filling every corner with what-ifs. She braced herself for disappointment, for the careful withdrawal she had seen before in others. Instead, he did something she never anticipated. He stayed, not just physically, but emotionally. He asked questions. He offered support without control. Oh, he acknowledged the fear without letting it dictate the future. He did not promise that everything would work out, but he promised she would not face it alone. That choice, more than anything else, changed the course of their story. The weeks that followed were hard. There were setbacks, long nights, moments when both wondered if love was enough, but there was also laughter, shared meals, quiet victories that only those who have fought for stability truly understand. Slowly, intentionally, they built a rhythm, not perfect, but honest. One evening, months later, they returned to the same cafe where it had all begun. The decorations were gone, replaced by the simplicity of everyday life. But as they sat there, children laughing softly beside them, she realized something profound. What had started as a risky decision, a mother bringing her daughter on a first Christmas date, had grown into a family formed not by fantasy but by choice. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw not a man who had saved her, but one who had walked beside her while she saved herself. And he saw in her not someone broken, but someone brave enough to love again. If this continuation of the story reached your heart, if it reminded you that healing is rarely instant but always possible, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. And before you leave, comment below and tell us, do you believe love is stronger when it grows slowly? Because sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with perfection. They begin with courage, patience, and the simple decision to stay.